Hey guys, Youngblood with you, and today I wanted to cover what we know about the Banu Defender in preparation for the sale that's coming up later today for $185, and that's going to run through May 1st. Now, the ship is called the Banu Defender. It was initially called the Banu Minuteman, but it got renamed to the Defender because that's exactly what it is. The Banu are a trading race. They're not an aggressive race. They're not a fighting race, but they do very much value their trading ships, so they need something to protect those convoys. So the ship overall's design was to really focus on making it very alien, very not human, and kind of striking the balance. They say they didn't want to make it look aggressive. I think it kind of does, but it's also a little bit more passive in the appearance too, so it's a really cool and unique design. And as far as the art direction is concerned, they really tried to take from the Banu Merchantman, like we see with other ships and different manufacturers, but we see things like the ramps and the textures. And basically, we know there's a ton of pride in the Banu Merchantman. That's something that gets handed down from generation to generation, and it gets upgraded, and it's just like a fine craftsmanship. That design carries over into the Defender, where you start seeing things like muted golds, hints of gemstones, and even their component system. They've got this shutter system that raises to kind of reveal the components versus having like doors and cabinets like we see on our human ships. As far as the way this flies, there is a multi-configuration thing. Now, it's not as significant as something like a xi'an Scout or even a Reliant, but the front section kind of sits down a little bit. The two arms that come off the front of the ship, when you land, they kind of rotate down and almost act as landing gear in a way. And it kind of looks like a crab, actually, but it's really cool the way it looks. Now, the designers here knew that if the Banu were going to have a fighter, it would really be purely an escort ship. And like I mentioned, it's because they value the Banu Merchantman so much, and they value their goods so much, that they really, really wanted to do just something that focused on the defense. And as part of that, they had to really figure out, okay, based on lore and history and everything, how would a Banu crew work differently than, humans would? They'd have to figure out the way they would work together because it's a dual cockpit system. The Banu end up having the social system where they specialize in one very specific field. And that carries over into this, which is why you would see like the dual cockpit having one person flying the ship and one person actually gunning the ship, both from the cockpit. So it's kind of unlike us. The way we would do that is we would have a pilot who's also controlling the main weapons and then maybe a secondary person in a turret. They're both in the cockpit just doing different things. They really have to focus on working in tandem, working together in that dual cockpit, because one person's flying, one person's shooting, and that's controlling the gimbaled weapons for the gunner to try and track the targets while the pilot is actually flying it. Now, this ship is going to be produced for humans, which means that it's supposed to be able to be, piloted and, I guess, gunned by one person. So you don't need to have somebody else to control your weapons. But you have the capability of actually doing that. So you could either bring somebody in to do the gunning, you could have them come in and do radar, engineering, whatever it may be. Now, the ship is interesting, and it's going to have bigger shields than what we see on most of the fighters in the game. However, the trade-off there is that it's going to have a very weak hull. Basically, it's kind of like the Polaris, just not actually in a... just not like in a capital ship sense. This is a fighter. And when the shields go down, you're going to be in a lot of trouble because that hull is going to be able to really break apart. And part of me wonders how much of that's going to translate to the Banu Merchantman, but that's a topic for a different day. But they do say that ejection is capable in both of the cockpits. Either one person can jet or both. So I guess depending on how the ship is being damaged, that may be of value. And then one interesting thing that they actually mentioned was that this ship actually has a xi'an engine on it. A Banu ship has a xi'an engine, but we do know that the Banu trade with everybody, so that kind of makes sense. But it turns out that they initially had Banu engines on there. They traded with the xi'an, they got the design for the xi'an engine, they basically retro-engineered it, and now that's the standard that's on these ships. So it's a Banu ship with some xi'an technology, which is really kind of interesting because we're starting to see more of the blending of races there. So we're going to have a lot more information on this ship, like components, what weapons it has, overall size. It seems to be pretty big, but we're going to cover that in a lot of detail once we get that, so make sure you're staying tuned for that video coming soon. Have yourselves a wonderful day, and take care.